Hello everyone and welcome back. As you might have noticed, I haven't done this read aloud in 2 weeks. That's because I was doing a little more things for Black History Month, like my read aloud of 51 Black Heroes. But you can check out about half of them in the link in the description below. And if you lost track of the last chapter of this book, that will also be in the description. So let's continue. Chapter 15. The posters were all over the school the next morning, in the cafeteria, the classrooms, even in the restrooms. There was no avoiding them. Southside Middle School Talent Show. Think you're a superstar? Bring it! Show us your best self and you could win a school supplies of movie passes. Zeke and T'Challa stared at the yellow and green posters in the hallway. Zeke asked, "Maybe we can have a chess tournament?" "I don't think that'd be too exciting," T'Challa confessed. "Well, maybe you could do a wrestling demonstration," Zeke suggested. T'Challa thought about that. "I don't know," he said. "What about you? What other hobbies do you have?" Zeke chewed his lip. "Well, I like to read a lot." "I don't think that's going to work either," T'Challa said. "I know what I'm going to do," a voice sounded behind them. T'Challa turned around to see Sheila. She was carrying a small silver briefcase. "I'm going to do a science experiment." "What kind of experiment?" T'Challa asked. "Well," said Sheila, "I'm going to make fog in the auditorium." "Fog?" Zeke repeated. "How?" "It's really not that difficult," Sheila said. "All I need are the right elements." "Good luck with that," Zeke teased. "Well, what's your special talent?" Sheila rounded on him. "Being a dork?" "I know you are, but what am I?" Zeke shot back. "I know you are," Sheila countered. T'Challa whipped his head back and forth as they continued to chatter. T'Challa had been so busy with things he had forgotten about his own science project. The teacher, Mr. Bellwether, had requested the assignment on his first day. He needed an idea. Fortunately, one came to him quickly. Later that night, while M'Baku was practicing basketball, he approached the front desk to find Clarence, hunched over and typing. T'Challa coughed. Clarence looked up. T'Challa slid a piece of paper across the marble counter. "Do you know where I can get all this stuff?" he asked. 20 minutes later, after a short walk to a place called WALGREENS, T'Challa looked at all the assembled parts spread out at the embassy floor room. A small motor, plastic wheels, metal rods, springs, nuts, bolts, assorted screws, and 2 small flashlights. "Wish I had some of my tools from Wakanda," he thought. "Oh well, I'll just do something basic. Not too advanced." It took him an hour to build it. He took it to science class the next day, along with the TV remote from the embassy, which he had hacked. "Who's next?" Mr. Bellwether asked. He was a tall man with a bald head and pants that were always too short. He looked at his tablet. "T. Charles, come on up." T'Challa picked up the box from the floor and walked it to the front of the classroom. "So, what did you make?" Mr. Bellwether asked. "A robot," T'Challa answered. Mr. Bellwether nodded, and T'Challa saw the disbelief behind his eyes. "Oh, really? Well, let's see then." T'Challa took the contraption out of the box and set it on the floor. He pointed the remote at it and pressed play. The little device whirred and clicked and spun around. Everyone began to murmur and point. Mr. Bellwether got up from his seat and looked at the small invention, turning and twisting. "I wanted to voice activate it," T'Challa said, "but I didn't have time." Mr. Bellwether walked in a circle around the robot. "Curious. This is quite advanced, Mr. Charles. Where did you learn this?" "Advanced?" T'Challa thought. He steered the robot out of a corner. "Just experimenting," he said. A half hour later, T'Challa had a crowd around him in the lunchroom, as the robot turned in circles, blinked, and zoomed under tables and chairs. "Awesome! Can you build me one?" "Dude, your robot is sick." "Sick?" T'Challa said. "What do you mean?" Sheila laughed. "That means cool, T." Several people fell back as someone quickly pushed through the crowd. A large brown boot came down on the robot. Crunch! Springs and screws went flying. The robot gave one last whir and then stopped moving. T'Challa looked up. It was Gemini Jones. "Oops," Gemini said. "Sorry." T'Challa's blood boiled. He took a step toward Gemini with clenched fists. Chairs scraped as people stepped back. "Uh-oh! Fight! Break it up! Back in your seats!" T'Challa turned around to see a teacher jogging over. She was tall, her hair tied back in a severe ponytail. He thought she was the girls' PE teacher. She looked down at the smashed robot. "Is this yours?" she asked T'Challa. "It was," he said. She turned to Gemini. "Should have known you'd be at the center of this, Mr. Jones. Did you do this?" Gemini smirked. "Yeah, I broke his little robot. So what?" The teacher tightened her lips. "My office," she said. "Now." "Later, Africa," Gemini called as he followed the teacher away. T'Challa looked down at his demolished creation. He bent to pick up the pieces. He knew people like Gemini back in Wakanda. They usually came to no good end.